The pasta was already cold when she laughed, not at me, not with me, just into her phone. She was standing 3 feet away, still wearing her shoes, purse still on her shoulder. Her eyes locked on some message that made the corner of her mouth twitch. I had lit the stupid candle. I had grated the cheese. I had even sprinkled red pepper flakes the way she liked, even though they made me sneeze. "Dinner's ready," I said. "Not loud. Just enough." She didn't answer. She just kept tapping. Tap, tap. Pause. Smile. Tap. I cleared my throat. "If we wait any longer, it's going to be healed." "Not now," she said, still not looking at me. Then she took her phone and wandered into the hallway like I hadn't spoken at all. I stood there, still holding the second fork. That was the moment. Not when I found the receipt from that hotel 2 towns over. Not when I overheard her on the porch calling someone, "You make me feel young again." Not even when she locked her phone like it was a vault the moment I entered a room. No, it was that "not now." It wasn't anger. It was something worse. It was absence, like she was already somewhere else and her body just hadn't caught up yet. So I placed the fork gently on the table, but it never hit the plate. I kept holding it. I don't know why. Maybe I was afraid of the sound it would make. Maybe I just needed to hold something that wasn't walking away from me. The hallway light flicked on. I heard her voice, soft and sugary, saying, "I can't talk long." Not to me. Never to me. The rest of that night is a blur. Just long stretches of silence except for the faint buzzing of her phone charging and the dryer running for the second time that day, even though she hadn't done laundry. I didn't sleep, just stared at the ceiling while the shadows crawled like spiders across the drywall. In the morning, I made toast, 1 slice, ate it standing up. She walked in wearing different clothes, not her usual work ones. Hair curled, perfume she hadn't used in a year. "I'll be out late," she said. I looked at her, then at the spot on the wall just behind her. I didn't ask where. I didn't offer coffee. I just whispered one word low and soft. "Farewell." She blinked once, and then she left. I didn't go after her. I didn't peek out the window. I didn't scroll through her social media or call her friends to ask where she was going dressed like that. I just stood there in the kitchen holding the mug I hadn't filled, listening to the quiet like it was trying to tell me something. The toast crumbs on the counter looked like tiny cracks, scattered evidence of something broken that no one would ever sweep up. I wandered back to the bedroom like someone checking a hotel room before checkout. I half expected to find a note, a suitcase missing, a drawer left open. But everything was perfectly in place. Her necklace still dangled from the lamp like it always did. Her robe still hung on the back of the bathroom door, sleeves limp and hollow. The only thing that stood out was her wedding ring abandoned on the soap dish beside the sink like it had slipped off and no one cared enough to pick it up. I stared at it for a long time. The faucet dripped slowly, annoyingly. I didn't touch the ring, didn't even move closer. I just kept looking at it while my brain shouted things I didn't want to hear. She took it off for someone else. She didn't forget it. She wanted you to see it. I should have been angry. I should have thrown something, screamed, slammed doors. But instead, I went to the laundry room. I opened the dryer, which had stopped hours ago, and reached in, not for clothes, but for answers. Inside were 2 things, one of her workout tops and a pair of men's socks I didn't recognize. My chest tightened like my lungs decided to fold inward. The socks were newer than anything I owned, gray with dark blue stripes. They didn't smell like our detergent. I held them like they were evidence at a crime scene. That's when I knew It wasn't just emotional distance. It wasn't about work stress or growing apart. There was someone else. There had been someone else for a while, and they were comfortable enough to leave things behind in my house, in my dryer. I didn't confront her that day. I didn't text her. I didn't tell anyone. Instead, I opened my laptop and started typing the words, "How to disappear from your own marriage." Not literally. I wasn't looking to fake my death or move to Montana. I just wanted to vanish from the role I had played for too long. Silent husband, invisible man, background noise. That night, she didn't come home. I stayed up until 2 a.m., lights off, just me and the hum of the fridge, the occasional creak of the wall settling. Every car that passed made me flinch. I kept expecting to see headlights sweep across the living room, but they never did. Eventually, I lay down on the couch and stared at the ceiling until it turned from black to gray. She walked in at 6:12 a.m., hair disheveled, heels in her hand. She moved like a teenager, sneaking in past curfew, but we were both too old for curfews and too broken for excuses. I didn't say anything. I didn't ask where she'd been. She didn't offer a single word, just walked into the bathroom and shut the door. The ring was still there on the soap dish. She stayed in the bathroom for nearly 40 minutes. I heard the shower running, but it was the kind of sound that felt performative, like noise meant to fill a silence rather than clean anything. I didn't move from the couch. I just sat there in the same position I'd been in all night, staring at the coffee table where a used tissue sat like a reminder of everything that hadn't been said. When the water stopped, I closed my eyes, not to rest, just to avoid looking at the shape her absence had carved into the room. When the door opened, I heard her footsteps hesitate. She probably didn't expect me to still be there. Maybe she thought I'd be off to work or out for a run. Things I used to do when I believed they mattered. But I remained still. She padded across the hallway in socks. Probably not the gray ones from the dryer, though. That thought flashed through my mind anyway. She didn't say a word, didn't apologize, didn't ask if I slept okay or why I was on the couch. Just walked to the bedroom and closed the door. I finally stood. My legs ached from staying folded too long like the rest of me had been holding back. I made my way to the bathroom, not even sure why. The mirror was still fogged, the towel draped neatly over the rack. But there was something new. A man's razor sitting on the counter beside hers. Black handle, unfamiliar brand. I opened the drawer. More of the same. A small can of shaving cream, an unopened toothbrush with packaging from a chain hotel I'd never stayed at. I didn't need a confession. These things said everything. I stepped back, leaned against the doorframe and tried to breathe slowly. That's when I heard it. Her voice, quiet, low, but not alone. A muffled conversation. Her voice mixed with another. At first, I thought it was a call. But no. No static, no gaps, no repetition. It was clearer, more intimate, like someone on speaker. I moved carefully through the hall and leaned toward the bedroom door. "He doesn't know," she whispered. "I didn't tell him. I can't. Not yet." There was a pause, a faint response I couldn't quite make out. Then she laughed softly, the kind of laugh I hadn't heard in months. Delicate, real, and full of someone else. "I miss you already," she said. Then, after a beat, "Yeah, last night too." I stepped back. My hand was clenched, though I hadn't realized it. My mouth was dry, but I couldn't bring myself to swallow. I turned around and walked straight out of the house. Not to escape, not because I couldn't handle the truth, but because I needed air that wasn't shared with her. I ended up in the park a few blocks away, sitting on a bench where we used to drink coffee in fall. Leaves were starting to turn again. The world was moving on as if nothing inside me had just collapsed. I stayed there for hours, watching couples walk past, kids toss frisbees, dogs chase squirrels. I wasn't jealous. I was numb. Eventually, I went home, not because I wanted to, but because I had nowhere else to be. The house smelled like her perfume again. She was sitting at the kitchen table, phone in hand, scrolling, legs crossed like she hadn't just erased me from her life, one text at a time. She looked up when I came in. "Hey," she said, casual, like everything was normal. I nodded, walked past her and into the bedroom. The razor and the toothbrush were gone. She had hidden them, but not from me, from herself. The next morning didn't begin with words, just the usual sounds. The fridge compressor clicking on, birds chirping through the half-open window, the soft clink of her spoon in a yogurt cup. She sat at the counter, legs folded up on the stool, face buried in her phone again. Not a glance in my direction. I waited for her to say something, anything, even if it was, "Can you grab milk later?" But nothing came. I watched her from the hallway, my hand wrapped around the doorframe like I needed it to keep me upright. I was beginning to realize something horrifying. She had already moved on emotionally, maybe even physically, and I had somehow become the guest overstaying his welcome in his own home. After she left for work, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the ceiling for what felt like hours. I couldn't focus. My thoughts kept drifting in and out like I was half asleep. But one thought kept returning. Who was he? The man she whispered to. The man whose socks were in my dryer. The man she missed already. I didn't want to become the kind of man who snooped. But there's a moment when betrayal turns desperation into instinct. I opened her laptop. It was still on the desk in the guest room where she sometimes worked late. I expected a password prompt. There wasn't one. She must have forgotten to log out. Or maybe she never thought I'd look. Her email was still open. My hands were trembling before I even clicked anything. My heart thudded so loudly I could barely hear myself breathe. The first message I saw was from a sender named C. Subject: Last night was more than I expected. I didn't want to click. I clicked anyway. It started with "Still tasting you." I stopped reading. I shut the laptop, pushed it away, and stood up so quickly the chair screeched against the floor. My mouth was dry, my chest hollow. That line wasn't just a flirtation. It was an eraser, a rewriting of everything I thought I meant to her. And there was another tab open. Messaging app still signed in. My hand hovered over the trackpad again, shaking, but I clicked it. I wish I could say it was curiosity. It wasn't. It was pain, demanding a shape. The chat thread was full. Photos, voice notes, jokes, plans, a hotel reservation. One message from her said, "I almost told him. I was so close. But then he made me dinner. I couldn't crush him right in front of his lemon pasta." She even mentioned the pasta. I dropped my head into my hands. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was how she talked about me. Like I was this fragile, clueless figure she pitted. Like I was something she'd outgrown. And then came the final blow. One message from C that simply read, "So when are we telling him?" She replied, "Soon." But I wanted to be clean. I want him to leave thinking it was his idea. I pushed away from the desk, stood in the doorway, and stared at the guest room like it had turned into a different house entirely. She wasn't just cheating. She was planning my exit. And the worst part, I was still in love with her. Still waking up hoping this nightmare would dissolve. That afternoon, I didn't make dinner. I didn't speak to her. I didn't even stay in the house. I drove for hours with no destination, just empty streets and the sound of my own breathing. By the time I came home, the lights were off. She was already in bed. I didn't join her. I sat on the floor of the laundry room beside the dryer, where it all began, and just stared at the door, because something in me was shifting. And for the first time in months, I wasn't sure if I wanted to fix this. The next day felt quieter than usual. Not peaceful quiet, more like the silence that follows a power outage, a sort of absence that hangs in the air like static, like everything's still technically there, just no longer alive. She was gone before I woke up. No note, no text, no coffees on. I didn't expect any of it, but I noticed anyway. I think that's the part people don't tell you. When love leaves a house, it still leaves its fingerprints behind. I wasn't planning to go through her things. I really wasn't. But when I opened the hall closet to grab my jacket, I saw the shoebox, plain brown, taped closed, but carelessly. A single strip of packing tape across the lid, barely holding it shut. Something told me not to touch it. Another part of me, the wounded, shaking, pathetic part, needed to. Inside were things I hadn't seen in years. Old movie ticket stubs from our second anniversary. A dried flower from a hike we took in Colorado. A postcard I sent her from a business trip before we got married. And then beneath those memories, things that weren't meant for me. A pair of sunglasses I didn't recognize. A small silver lighter. A receipt from a steakhouse 3 towns over. Not one we'd ever visited. 2 glasses of wine. 1 porterhouse. The cheesecake. And a room number scribbled in pen. My breath caught. It wasn't even the dinner that broke me. It was the carelessness, the laziness of hiding this in the same box that once held our early love. And then came the letter folded twice, tucked onto the receipt like an afterthought. No envelope, just a short handwritten note in her looping cursive addressed only as "to see." I didn't want to read it. I did. Last night wasn't just a mistake. It was clarity. I don't know what this means yet, but it felt like waking up. Like I hadn't realized how numb I'd become until you touched me. I still care about him. But I think I'm ready to choose joy now. Yours, D. I stood there holding that letter, every inch of my body vibrating with quiet devastation. I didn't cry. That would have been easier. I just froze like my emotions were too stunned to move. My eyes burned, but nothing came out. I put the letter back in the box and closed it carefully, like it was a fragile thing, though it had just detonated inside me. I slid it back into the closet exactly where it had been, not out of mercy, out of shame. I didn't want her to know I'd seen it, not yet. I wasn't ready to show her how far I'd sunk. I wanted to keep that last sliver of pride, the illusion that I hadn't been broken all the way through. That night, she came home late again, smelled like wine. Her lipstick was smudged in a way that didn't match how she left. She tossed her bag on the floor and kicked off her heels like she lived alone. I was in the living room pretending to read an article on my phone. She didn't ask how my day was, didn't ask if I'd eaten, just passed through the room with a lazy, "Hey," and disappeared into the bathroom. I stared at the TV, which wasn't even on. I waited for the door to close. Then I whispered it again. Not loud, not bitter, just one word. Farewell. Not because she could hear it, but because I needed to remind myself that I was already leaving. The night after I found the letter, I couldn't sleep. I didn't even try. I laid there on the couch again, one foot dangling off the side like a child waiting to be tucked in, though no one was coming. At some point around 2:40 a.m., I heard her laugh from the bedroom. It wasn't loud. It was more like a half-chuckle muffled by sheets in secrecy. But it was enough. Enough to confirm she wasn't sleeping. Enough to confirm she wasn't alone. Even if it was just virtually. I got up, walked slowly down the hallway and stood outside the door. I didn't knock, didn't open it. I just listened. There was the rustle of blankets, the faint buzz of a phone speaker. Her voice again, quiet and soft, but with that tone she used to use only with me when she still liked me. I heard her say something like, "Stop. I'm going to laugh too loud." Then a pause. Then, "I miss you already." I backed away. I wasn't ready to hear more. It wasn't that I couldn't take it. I already had. I just knew I'd never be able to forget the sound of her smiling at another man through the same pillow we once shared. I went to the kitchen and opened a bottle of water just to make some noise. Something real. Something mine. I stood at the sink and stared out into the backyard where the porch light was flickering the same way it had been for weeks. She'd always asked me to fix things like that. Lately, she didn't ask anymore. She didn't need me anymore. Then, for reasons I still can't explain, I picked up her old iPod, the one she used to run with years ago. She'd stopped using it after switching to her phone, but it still sat in the drawer next to the junk mail, old pins and expired coupons. I only touched it because I wanted to feel something that hadn't betrayed me. Something from a time when she still reached for my hand without hesitation. It powered on. To my surprise, it hadn't been reset. There were playlists from as far back as 2012. Winter drive weekend with the rainy day pancakes. I almost smiled. Almost. Then I saw the recordings. Not music. Voice memos. Curious. I tapped the most recent one. The timestamp read 3 weeks ago. It started mid-sentence, her voice speaking low and breathless. I don't even know why I still live with him. It's like I'm trapped in a memory I don't believe in anymore. He's kind, but I can't feel it. He's there, but I don't see him. When I'm with you, it's like I exist again. I stopped it there. I didn't need to hear the rest. That was enough. She had recorded her betrayal in her own voice, saved it like a diary entry. Not for me. Probably not even for him. Just for herself. A way to document the unspooling of our life like it was a journal she planned to reread once I was gone. The next morning, I placed the iPod in the middle of the kitchen table before she woke up. I didn't leave a note, didn't say a word. I wanted her to see it, to know I knew, but I didn't want to fight. I didn't have the strength to perform rage. All I had left was a slowly emptying heart and a head full of her whispered confessions. When she came into the kitchen, hair still damp, robe cinched too tightly, she saw the device and froze. She didn't touch it. She just looked at me. "You listened?" she asked finally. I nodded once. That was all. Her eyes didn't fill with guilt or sorrow, just frustration, like I'd interrupted something. "I never meant to hurt you," she said quietly, but I could tell by her tone she didn't mean to get caught either. I poured myself coffee. It tasted like burnt wood and regret. "I won't stop you," I said. "If you're going, just do it." She opened her mouth to say something. I saw it. That tiny window where the truth might have leapt out and changed everything. But instead she said nothing. She just picked up the iPod and walked out of the room. That was when I started planning my exit quietly, without confrontation, without ceremony. Because the man I had become, the one she didn't love anymore, wasn't going to beg. He was going to vanish. I started with the closet, not hers, mine. I opened the doors and stood there for several minutes, trying to decide what mattered and what didn't. My hand moved slowly like it had never touched these clothes before. I picked out a few shirts that didn't remind me of her. Jeans that still fit, socks that hadn't shared drawer space with any belonging to that faceless man. The hardest part wasn't choosing what to pack. It was pretending I didn't care which sweater had been her favorite on me. I didn't take everything. I didn't want to. I didn't want her to walk in and see the hollow shell of my absence and feel relief. I wanted her to notice just enough had vanished to make her uncomfortable, to make her wonder where I'd gone and why I hadn't screamed on my way out. I left the wedding photo on the shelf, but I took the frames back off and removed the tiny note she had written and hidden behind the glass 10 years ago. Let's never stop laughing. I folded it and placed it in my wallet. I wanted to carry that lie with me as a reminder, not because I missed it, but because I needed to never forget what false promises felt like. I moved through the house like a shadow. I deleted my calendar from the family tablet, cleared my grocery list off the shared app. I even reset the digital thermostat so it wouldn't carry my preferences anymore. It's bizarre how much of yourself you embed into the corners of a home without realizing. It took me hours to remove myself without leaving fingerprints. The only thing I left untouched was the kitchen chair I always sat in. I wanted her to see that space empty, night after night. That evening, she came home earlier than usual. No perfume this time, no lipstick. Her face looked puffy, like she'd cried in the car or argued with someone. I stayed calm, stayed quiet. I was sitting on the front step sipping from a thermos I'd filled with cheap whiskey. I never drank much, but that night it helped numb the pulse in my jaw. She looked at me as if I were the one intruding. "What are you doing out here?" I shrugged. "Getting some air." She hovered in the doorway like the house didn't know which of us it belonged to anymore. She seemed tired, not the kind of tired from a long day, the kind that creeps in when lies begin to weigh more than the truth ever did. "I didn't mean for things to turn out like this," she said after a long pause. "Neither did I replied, and took another sip. A car passed slowly down the street. A kid rode by on a bike with a lopsided helmet. The world continued, oblivious. "I think we should talk," she said, stepping halfway onto the porch. But I shook my head. "You already said everything you needed to say. I just heard it in the wrong room." She looked down for once. No defense, no excuses. I stood. I won't make this dramatic. No arguments, no drawn-out goodbyes. I'll be gone by morning. She opened her mouth. Maybe to protest, maybe to negotiate her guilt into something she could live with. But I stepped past her and walked back inside. The air between us felt too crowded to breathe. That night, she didn't sleep in our bed. I know because I stayed awake the whole time, sitting at the edge of the mattress, staring at the wall and listening for every footstep. Around 3 a.m., I heard her on the phone again, not whispering, not trying to hide anymore. "No, he knows." He didn't even yell. It's almost worse, honestly. Then quieter. "I don't know what to feel. I didn't think it would be this hollow." That was the first honest thing I had heard from her in months. At 5:45 a.m., I zipped my bag, brushed my teeth with the spare brush she never noticed I'd switched, and walked out without touching the doorknob twice like I always used to. I left no note, no text, no "please don't call." because I wanted my silence to say what my voice never could.
She said, "Not now," and I finally listened.
I didn't go far that first day, just far enough that her face faded from the side mirror and my chest stopped aching with every mile. I ended up in a small town with a diner that smelled like syrup and burnt coffee. The kind of place where no one asks where you're from or why your eyes look hollow. I sat at the counter, ordered pancakes I didn't finish, and stared out the window until the waitress asked if I wanted a refill 3 times before I heard her. That first night away, I stayed in a motel with flickering lamps and a buzzing air conditioner. The mattress sagged in the middle, and the TV only got 5 channels, but it was quiet. My kind of quiet. Not the kind that suffocates, but the kind that lets you breathe again. Over the next few weeks, I rented a tiny 1-bedroom in a town I'd only driven through once during a college road trip. It was near a lake, not the kind you'd find on postcards, but wide enough that the sunrise danced on the water like it meant something. I got a job stocking inventory at a hardware store. Nothing glamorous, no title to brag about. But I came home tired for honest reasons. Not emotional exhaustion, just aching feet and sore shoulders. Some nights, I still thought about her. Sometimes I even missed her. But it wasn't the real her I missed. It was the version I'd loved. The woman who used to fall asleep mid-sentence on the couch with her hand curled in mine. The woman who once baked me a birthday cake from scratch, even though it collapsed in the middle. I don't hate her. I don't even blame her entirely. People grow apart. Sometimes they leave in pieces instead of all at once. But here's the truth. The farther I got from that house, the closer I came back to myself. I started playing the guitar again, badly but earnestly. I joined a community book club. Even though I skipped 3 meetings in a row, I talked to people without measuring every word. I even laughed one afternoon when the neighbor's dog stole my lunch sandwich right out of my hand. It had been so long since I'd laughed that I startled myself. One evening, about 2 months after I left, I walked down to the lake just before sunset. The sky was melting into colors I didn't know how to name, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a ghost in someone else's story. I sat on the dock, legs dangling over the edge, and I whispered something, not to her, not to the past, but to myself. You're still here. And I was a little bruised, still tender in places no one could see. But I was here, breathing, healing, starting. I never responded to her last message. She sent it a week after I left. Just 4 words. I didn't expect this. But by then, I had nothing left to explain. The story had already closed its final chapter. Now, every night before I go to bed, I leave 1 lamp on. Not for someone else, not in hope, but as a promise to myself that no matter how dark things once were, I will never again live in a house where I feel invisible. Somewhere, she's probably still trying to explain what happened to friends, maybe even to herself. But I don't need an ending that makes sense to her. I have my own now. A quiet, warm place. A new beginning. And this time, I'm not whispering goodbye. I'm standing in the moment.